From your perspective, what are maybe 2 green flags and 2 red flags that you'd see from people when they choose to borrow and you think this may not go well?
Really good question. They don't understand the difference between CapEx and OpEx.
Okay, explain it to
And
us.
I made a video about this a
Yeah.
very long time ago. So OpEx is your operational expenses, right? So that's your staff bills, that's your marketing spend, the things you need to pay to operate your business. Without paying those things, the business doesn't run. CapEx is your R&D, your machinery,
Research and development.
your
Yeah.
research and development, your the big swings,
Got you.
right?
Yeah.
So great example is Asset Avenue, right? CapEx would be for you, all right, we're going to get a studio. We're going to actually go and buy a studio.
Yeah.
Right. And to do that, it's going to take some R&D. We've got to find the right place. We've got to find the right people to work there. And we need to raise a significant amount of money for human resource and for buying the actual studio itself. And that's going to give us a hockey stick trajectory. OpEx for Asset Avenue is, all right, we need to cover the marketing costs for the ads that we do to help people see what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So you're spending OpEx on a monthly basis. CapEx, you probably do it every 1 or 2 years. And I think the moment people don't understand that, they're often taking funding that's meant for CapEx for OpEx.
Wow.
Or funding that's meant for OpEx for CapEx. And that's where the mismatch happens. And that's when you know there's going to be some challenges. Because there's different finance products for different reasons. And if you've got the wrong capital stack or the wrong capital structure, you're gonna find yourself in a pickle.
Do you give advice to people?
Yeah, we do give advice. Or I'll say more guidance.
Guidance.
Because obviously advice is regulated.
Yeah.
So we don't tell
But I
people
just
what
more
products,
mean business. Yeah.
about business,
advice,
yeah. But definitely, yeah, we do. And like, we spoke about, before we started, I'm trying to think about how can I not only provide advice from our perspective, but all of the advisors that we've worked with to date, which have, enabled us to do some of the work that we've done or worked with some of the big clients that we work with. How can I get them to give our clients advice through some sort of medium as well?
Okay, amazing. And so do you have a green flag, something that you've seen some businesses do and they've been able to maybe use that loan to get to the next level?
Yeah, I think a big green flag has to be someone who knows their numbers.
Yeah.
They know their margins. They know they know their numbers clearly, right? They know their cash flow conversion cycle, i.e., if I take this money today, I'm going to put it into marketing. This is my cost of this is my CAC, customer acquisition cost. This is my ROAS. This is how much I generate from the customers that I acquire. This is when I'm going to be able to pay it back, because our cash flow conversion it takes 2 months to get the product into the UK, 2 months to sell it via our platform on average. So because of that, I'm going to take an 8-month loan to buy myself 4 months additional time. When I see people talking from a numbers perspective, it's a green flag that, okay, this person has the ability to financially engineer this capital into their business and understand how they're going to make a return on investment from it.
So there's a pattern you've described where, like, maybe the same banks, they reject founders early on and then they come back to you years later, maybe asking how to work with those founders now that they're doing very well, so maybe millions in revenue. How does that make you feel? And what does it tell us about how the system actually works?
That's right, yeah. There's a saying, no one gives you you're most likely to receive, no one borrows you their umbrella when it's raining. People always want to work with you when things are good. People always want to cover you and support you when things are good.
So annoying.
People always want to be around you when the good times are going, right? But when things are tough and it's raining, no one's going to give you their umbrella to cover yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's saying my old boss always used to say to me, and I think that's kind of how I see the kind of tier 1 banks at the moment. I think also another thing that's happened with the tier 1 banks is they've realized if we don't get our act together, we're going to lose the SME market. And that happened during the likes of, the tides coming to the mainstream, the Starling banks taking significant market share. Those neobanks started coming, and then the government started putting certain policies in place to support more, more niche and smaller banks. So there's been a real shift, and I think the big banks have realized, hold on a minute, we need these smaller SMEs, because yes, they may not pay us the millions that the large transactions do, but they can potentially get there. And some of them will get there.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that with the likes of the Gymsharks. And look, they're not happening every day, right? You don't see a Gymshark every day, but Gymshark started off as a small company. Whoever banked them first, most likely now is laughing.
Yeah.
So,
and what made you target this specific group of underrepresented founders and businesses?
So, and obviously, as I mentioned prior with the whole church scenario, the feedback that we received once we had provided that facility was there was tons of other people in a similar position, which is because there was three key problems, right? One was the banks were rejecting SMEs.
Yeah.
And that was just really because, from SME lending, they don't make a significant IRR, internal rate of return. They'll probably make more from a 25-year mortgage than they will from a 2-year loan, right? There's some things there, but yeah, that's one of the reasons. Two, there is a thin credit file problem amongst those from underrepresented communities in particular. And it's not that they have bad credit, it's that many of them are first or second generation, so they haven't built up a significant credit profile. Often in society, what you see is in the West, and this kind of goes to where these underrepresented communities come from in the West, so in the Americas, the UK, some of Europe, debt is glorified. That's how they run their economies.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In emerging countries, the Africans, the Caribbeans, the Asians, there's a saving culture. So debt is seen as dirty.
Yeah.
Right? And that's more to do with how these economies have been built. It's more to do with, just the way the world has worked. They've always seen debt as a, taking on credit as, I wouldn't say a bad thing, but as a thing to look to frown upon. Whilst in the West, the Vanderbilts, the JP Morgans, the Rockefellers, they built their business, they built America off the money of the aristocrats in the UK who lent them money through bonds.
Yeah.
So there's a different culture, and when you see these underrepresented communities or the people that come from these communities come to the UK, they keep their emerging economy or their emerging culture, if that makes sense, which is I don't want to I don't want to understand the credit system. I just want to live here, work, make money, and save, because it's a survival mode.
Yeah,
it's a survival mode thing, right? So because of that, when they do come and they start businesses, they keep that culture, not realizing that the only way to scale a business is with capital. And if you're not starting a business which is venture backable, the only other capital you have available to you is either grants, which are very limited, or credit.
Yeah.
So they often find themselves with great business ideas and great businesses, but not the capital, which means they don't build their credit profile. So they don't build a credit profile, they have a thin credit profile problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And then the last problem is the fear of rejection,
yeah,
which stems from the thin credit file profile. Because they have a thin credit file profile, when they do finally approach the bank, when they need the money, i.e. when the church needed the money and they did finally approach the bank and the bank says no, it goes back to that fact I mentioned before of 20% of those that get rejected, only 20% go and seek an alternative. The other 80% fear being rejected again. And a lot of people from underrepresented communities fear rejection. Yeah. Right. So those are the three key problems that we found, and that's why we work with people from these communities, because we, our products and I guess the way we do things tend to solve these issues.
So what would you say a business owner actually needs to understand about equity, dilution, and investors' rights before they walk into, I guess, a certain level of business?
Yeah, I think you want to understand dilution very early. I never forget, I was giving away some shares in the company, and I was explaining to the person that you're going to be diluted. So it was kind of like, and I'll be honest, I'm a very open, transparent person, right? With everyone, right? And he was so shocked that I told him about dilution, because he was like, so this X percentage that I'm gonna get in the company, if you didn't tell me about dilution, I would just always think I had X percent.
Okay.
No, but as more people come into the business, what happens is the pie gets bigger to some degree, but your share gets smaller.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Which is why business is such an amazing, it's a unique thing in itself. But it's very important you understand dilution.
Yeah.
I think it's very important you understand dilution. In regards to equity, I think it's also important you understand what equity is and kind of how it works and giving away equity and how to incentivize people, I think it's probably one of the biggest assets you have as a business owner, because your equity is effectively your time, your reserves, everything rolled up into one. And that gives you an equity valuation. And investor rights are also important, because there are some key milestones in any business, right? If you have 51% of a business, you own the majority. But if you have investor rights, which means A shares get X and double A shares get Y, then that 51% might look like 51%, but it might not be 51%.
Might not hold.
I think a great example of that was the whole Mark Zuckerberg Facebook scenario, where Mark Zuckerberg very smartly, if I'm not mistaken, he offered investors a certain type of share, which meant they would generate significant return in capital.
Okay.
But ownership wise, they didn't have as much ownership rights.
Yeah.
So you can be quite smart, some investors are incentivized by different things. And I think he knew quite quickly what he wanted Facebook to be. So ownership, even though he gave some ownership away, the kind of ownership he gave away always ensured that I think he had a certain level of voting rights and stuff like that. So I think investor rights are quite important.
And now I'd love to touch on what is next for Lendo, the big vision. You've talked about wanting to raise 10 million or more for businesses. Where is Lendo headed? What does the next chapter look like?
Good question. So we passed that a long time ago.
Yeah.
We've raised significantly more than that. The next chapter, which is really the next 5 to 10 years, is big. And so our whole thing is like kind of seeing what happened with the church and understanding the challenges of those in underestimated communities, then seeing COVID and understanding how there was so much challenges around people accessing finance in COVID. Our whole thing is to one day see a world where access to finance isn't based on bias, which is what it is at the moment often. I don't believe you're going to be able to repay this money because you don't look like the person who looks like they can repay this money.
Yeah.
We want to see a world where access to finance is based on merit and based on the numbers. And that's our big vision. So we'll be going until we see that happen in some way. But, it's the big B, isn't it? How do you put £1 billion into the hands of entrepreneurs who haven't been given the chance? And how does that change the world?
Yeah.
Right? What does a world look like where access to finance is level across, it's a level playing field? What does a world look like when Asset Avenue has 100 million?
Yeah.
Right? That's a true reflection of the world, right? Because then you get to kind of give the world your vision, what I say God put in you, and we see that as a much better world than what we're currently seeing today. So we're going into everything from infrastructure, and that could be technology, AI, and how we generate infrastructure that supports with providing access to finance and particularly credit, to, like I mentioned to you earlier, education. There's a great saying someone said to me, there's two things that can scale: tech and media. Right? And if you can do social media well and educate people well, you can touch millions of people very quickly.
Agreed.
Or you can scale cash as well, but and then by doubling down on what we're doing from a lending perspective. So over the next 5 years, we may not get to that billion mark, but we see ourselves very easily kind of seeing how we push 100 plus million into small businesses. That's our ambition and goal.